everybody. Earl at thelogbook.com back for more Voyages of Shelf Discovery. Kind of digging into the old toy box here to find some old friends and introduce you to them. It's kind of funny because as much as I have invested in like the little partially die-cast metal ships from Eagle Moss or Master Replicas or whoever, whenever I get them, no matter how much I love them, I wish they were more like this. These are the original Kenner die-cast Star Wars vehicles from... these were in production for a few years, like 1978 through 80. Obviously, we have the Millennium Falcon here. This was part of... and I've got a scan of the 1979 Kenner catalog up here. This was part of Series 2. Series 1 was X-Wing, Land Speeder, Standard TIE Fighter, Darth Vader TIE Fighter. Series 2 was the Millennium Falcon, Y-Wing Fighter, and what they call the Imperial Cruiser. You and I now know that as a Star Destroyer. This is my original Falcon. As you can see, obviously not new in the box, not by any stretch of the imagination, and yet still with all the bits. The clear plastic bubble is still on the cockpit. All of the landing gear, all three of the landing gear are intact. The gun is up top. The radar dish, or whatever that is up top. Yeah, you know, because it's a piece of Star Trek terminology, I like to honk people off and say it's a main deflector dish, but whatever function it serves, it's all pretty intact. Now let me tell you why that's amazing. Why that's freaking amazing. Because this little ship and I, and this almost sounds like Han Solo talking, have been through a lot together. I grew up in a house that had a concrete back patio with a concrete retaining wall that was taller than I was. And so this little ship, you know, did trench runs along that concrete retaining wall, you know, like it was the Death Star, and crashed and landed and got into dogfights and got dropped so many times. It is a miracle, an absolute miracle, that this is in the condition that it's in, quite frankly. And I say that because not all of my specimens are necessarily in that good a shape. Allow me to introduce you to my Y-Wing. There are bits missing off of this one. That little hole at the top of the cockpit, there used to be a rotating gun there. That gun is now AWOL. That little silver button you see behind the cockpit, yeah, kind of where the astromech droid would presumably be on a Y-Wing, that is supposed to be a button that would activate a spring mechanism that would kick the two engines off the wings. That spring mechanism gave up the ghost a long time ago, and the engines just got glued into place. So that button no longer does anything. The engines no longer pop off of the ship. As you can see, the engines are plastic, but the main body of the ship, for the most part, is die-cast with... there's kind of a hollow space in the middle, and you can see the back of it is also a piece of plastic. That's cool. I mean, it was all so well put together back then that, again, I suppose it's amazing that for whatever shortcomings the mechanical portion of this Y-Wing have encountered through the years, it is probably amazing still that it is as intact as it is. You know, the landing gear on the underside of the cockpit still folds down and folds back up, and it's fine. Whereas the Falcon had 3 retractable landing gear. Obviously, the rear landing gear on the Y-Wing is kind of built into the shape of the engines, and that's cool. That's just very cleverly designed. I really did not fall in love with the Y-Wing until I got this ship. The Kenner diecast line continued on into The Empire Strikes Back, at which point we got the twin pod cloud car, we got a snow speeder, I think we got a TIE Interceptor, and I think the TIE Interceptor was actually the last of these diecast vehicles, unfortunately. The diecast line, Kenner did not continue that into Return of the Jedi. So you only had vehicles from this line for Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. The twin pod cloud car, very nicely done. Again, you could tell from the paint that's been scraped off of it at various points. She's been flown, she's been crashed, she's been in a few dogfights. The landing gear still work, which is neat. The cockpit canopies are still intact, and as you can see, Kenner went through the trouble of putting the pilot in the cockpit. Absolutely did not have to do that, but why not? So there's a little, non-removable. You're not supposed to be able to open the cockpit on this. Non-removable figures of the two pilots. And I wonder if those two guys ever fought over who was actually driving. There's probably a cartoon or a comic or something like that. Let's take a look at the kind of the landing gear on the twin pod cloud car. You have to give them a little bit of a tug. You got to have some fingernails to open these guys up. Yeah, either that or you're going to break some fingernails opening them up. But once they're out, they're pretty solidly out. That's how they land. Hey, off we go. The Y-Wing, the landing gear is just a swivel down, but it kind of snaps into place nicely. It takes a little bit of effort to get it out once it is folded up in there. Very nicely designed. Very nicely designed. These guys knew these ships were going to be, held up like this and flown around the room with whooshy engine noises, because it doesn't count if you're not going whoosh. It just doesn't. Don't ask me how I know that. The Millennium Falcon, as you can see, the gun and the dish swivel. The cockpit, again, has these two tiny... It's molded into a single color of plastics, like this brown, dark red plastic. So, I guess it's Han and Chewie in there, of course. But there's very little detail, but they are in there. As you can see, the landing gear fold down like that. And you're off. So these are some of my oldest friends. These ships, these little ships, have been through so much for so many years. I mean, granted, there was a point at which they became residents of a shelf and not actively played with anymore. So maybe there was a period of about 4 or 5 years where these things were being very actively played with. And yet they're intact. Somewhere I still have a Star Destroyer, and somewhere I still have the Land Speeder. They just didn't turn up in time for me to do this video. And all that means is at some point you're going to get another video where I'm ranting and raving about the quality on these things. Because, let me tell you, the little die-cast ships you get today, for the most part, if they take a tumble, that's it. They are no longer in fighting shape. These things were built to last. And I did not take it easy on my little ships. They got flown around, they got crashed, they fell off of shelves, they got dropped, they fell out of pockets. Yeah, they fell out of carrying cases or whatever. And still they're here. Still they're part of my collection. Still intact. It really is a case of they don't make them like that anymore.